Alright, so the Ironman 70.3 Sunshine Coast 2022 race recap is here, and we had quite an interesting race to say the least. So I mean, I'll just jump straight into the results before we run through it. So for my first ever 70.3, we got it done in a time of 4 hours, 19 minutes, 54 seconds, which sounds quite impressive, but there was a few, let's say, interesting dynamics on the bike that made it quite a bit faster. But we'll get to that later. First, have a look at the times for the actual overall day, breaking it down into the splits. In the swim, 31 minutes, which is pretty close to my goal time of 30 minutes. The bike, 2 hours, 14 minutes, 33 seconds, which is about 30 minutes faster than my goal time. And then the run, 1 hour, 28 minutes, 35 seconds, which I was pretty happy with. That's just below, I was aiming for a 90-minute half marathon, so 1:28:35 is about 90 seconds below that. So pretty happy with the swim and the run, and I mean, we'll talk about the ride later, but first I'll run through sort of the whole day before we discuss any of the dynamics. So I had a pretty good lead up going into the race, a really comfortable week. There was a fair bit of travel, but good easy training for the week leading up to it, and pretty good clean nutrition as well. So no complaints. And then we start off race morning just with my typical race breakfast now, which was just some yogurt and nuts, something really light and easy to digest for the start of the day. Quick coffee and we're out the door. So on the way down to transition, and while I'm setting up all my gear, just drinking some Gatorade, and I had a banana. So that's pretty much it for the pre-race nutrition. Had about 500 ml of Gatorade and then 1 banana. I was hoping to do a warm-up swim, but didn't quite get the time. So pretty much just had a quick, shoulder mobility on the beach before we started, but that was basically it, and then we were ready to go. But then I went in and lined up, and I sort of started off at the back of zone 1. So zone 1's anything under 33 minutes, and my goal was to swim about 30 minutes, but I was, aware that it's quite possible I'll do 31, 32, or 33 sort of minutes. So right at the back of that zone 1 group, and then we went out into the water. And my main goal with the swim was just to keep it nice and comfortable and efficient, just to get some good open water experience, especially with, going straight out onto the bike. And that's exactly what I did. I just tried to stay relaxed and efficient the entire way through, good sighting, but not burning too many matches. I mean, flashback to Port Macquarie, and I got out of the swim totally exhausted. So I definitely didn't want to repeat that today. And that's exactly what happened. So I managed to get out of the water feeling pretty good. A few things I did to try and reduce the likelihood of the cramps getting out of the water this time was drinking the Gatorade and having a banana. So I had some carbs and electrolytes before the swim. But I was also making a note to exaggerate my kicks every so often. So maybe every 5 or so minutes I would do a really wide and long kick just to try and pump some blood through my legs. Because I noticed that when I do swim in a wetsuit, my feet sort of just drag along behind rather than doing any actual kicking. So I did make a mental note of it to try and really pump some blood through my legs as often as I could while I was out there in the swim. But we were really lucky that day. The ocean was dead flat. It was honestly like swimming in a lake. So the swim was really easy, really comfortable. And then as soon as I got to a level in the water that I could actually stand up in, so about to my chest, I just stood up there so that my legs had a chance to actually, progressively take the weight of my body rather than just getting into the shore and trying to stand up, because that's where I was worried I was going to cramp up and, have to crawl up into T1. That didn't happen, and fortunately we had a pretty good run into transition. My transitions are quite slow. Time in T1 was 3 minutes and 12 seconds, so definitely can save myself a bit of time there with some practice. I mean, I ran into the wrong bike rack and got totally lost, so there's a few things there that I didn't do quite well. I'm not very good at the running start, so I put my shoes on before and then ran out with my bike shoes on. But I mean, that takes us to the bike, and this is the real interesting part of the story for Sunshine Coast. So coming out onto the bike, there's a good pack of people that have all come out of the water at the same time with me. So there's a lot of people that swim around that 30, 31 minutes. And we all sort of get on the bike all at once, and coming out of T1, there's a lot of windy streets where you're really in town. It's quite narrow road. So we're all bunched in together, and that's pretty normal, I suppose, when you do start a race, and it's quite hard to split apart when it's, windy roads and we're not going that fast. So that's fair enough. But then once we get out onto the motorway where it's really smooth and fast, we're still in this big bunch, and I'm thinking to myself, this isn't quite right. We really should be starting to split up here soon. So we get out of town and we're on the motorway, and we are still packed in like a peloton. Like, it's not like we're tail to tail. I mean, it's a group ride where we're 4 or 5 riders wide, and it just doesn't feel right. So I'm looking around, there's really nowhere for me to drop back because the peloton just goes further back and there's riders still in front. I do try and break away around like 10 or 20 minutes into the ride, and doing that I'm pushing like 300 watts, you know, took it right up to like 40 kilometers an hour, as hard as I could really push. And after like 1 or 2 minutes trying to surge as hard as I could, that group just ended up swallowing me back over. So I was back in the group looking around thinking to myself, what is going on here? How are we going to, you know, actually space out? Because like there's 100 riders here all drafting off each other. It was insane. Now, I mean, the rule is that if a rider passes you, you would have to sit up out of the aero bars and essentially just free spin until they're 12 meters in front. But the thing is, for this race, if I was to be overtaken, so let's say after that surge I did when I was overtaken again, it wasn't like there was one rider coming past me. It was like a line of 100 riders all the way back as far as you could see going past. So I basically have to stop and get off the bike if I was to actually follow the rules. I mean, I'll have some photos up so you can see it, but it was insane, the amount of people that are all packed in on this road. And so for the first lap, that's almost what it was. It was like a train out there on the bike course. It wasn't just a few small packs, it was like one rolling group of athletes. And when you think about it, it kind of makes sense because 2,300 athletes started this race and it's only 22 Ks out and back. And if 2,300 people were to spread out 12 meters apart, that's 27 kilometers long. That would be a 27 kilometer long line of athletes out there on the road. It's basically just turning into a merry-go-round at that point, which is kind of insane. After I'd say about the first lap, rather than it just being one long line, I sort of found that, you know, these pelotons were more forming into bunches. So everyone was coming up and they were actually riding 4 or 5 wide. And it was just groups rather than one long train. They were just groups roaming around. So then you actually had some room to drop back. But if you were to drop back 12 meters on a peloton, you are still getting a huge draft advantage. So it's not like you can really, even if you are doing the right thing, you're still getting a massive advantage here in these groups. So there were times where I was rolling along at 40 kilometers an hour, barely pushing 150 watts, out of the aero bars, having a chat to the guy next to me, talking about how crazy the dynamics were. And we are still all on track to set huge PBs. So it was absolutely insane. I mean, I could further this point. So around the second lap, so when we start that and we head back up a hill, I actually dropped my chain at one point. So it just came off the big ring and I had to stop and put it back on. And that took about a minute. And so in that minute, this group obviously rides way off in front and they're, you know, hooting away at 40 plus kilometers an hour. And once the chain's back on, I get back down onto the flats behind them and I'm hammering as hard as I can to try and catch up. Because obviously there's such a huge advantage riding with them, and it seems to me like everyone else on the course is riding in these packs. So I'm not going to do the whole thing solo, and I'm hammering it as hard as I can to try and bridge back up. And it probably 10 to 15 minutes of me riding at threshold, trying to get back up to this group, just to the point that, you know, they're just in front of me and I can kind of see them now. Just as I get that far in, another group comes past and overtakes me. I jump on the back of them, drop it back to the point that I'm barely even pedaling, and now I'm rolling even faster than what I was when I was riding at threshold. So it was just crazy dynamics out there on the bike. I couldn't believe it. Now coming back into the town on the second lap, so almost at the end, I have to drop back to take a quick pee on the bike before we get back into town. And that means that I basically ride into transition on my own. And there's a good video of me riding back in, so instead of going in your next lap, you do a left turn to go down into T2 to get off the bike. And there's a video of me sitting up looking extremely confused because as I'm heading into transition 2, I notice there's only 85 kilometers recorded on my GPS. And I feel like I've missed part of the course. And yeah, it turns out the bike course was only 85 kilometers long. I found this out later by talking to everyone else who had also only recorded 85 kilometers on the GPS. So they could not have scripted a better way for us to all set extremely fast bike times. I mean, I'll touch on it too, like there were technical officials out there, and probably the worst thing I saw happen was that they would just go up to groups, point out one person, give them a penalty for drafting, and then move on to the next one. And that's totally unfair because there's one unlucky guy in the group that's getting penalized and the rest of the people are all doing the wrong thing and getting away with it, basically. I have heard stories though that there were other groups where the officials were hounding them, telling them to break apart. But if you've got a pack of riders that's, let's say, 30 big and you want them all to space out, let's say 10 meters, you're gonna have to get guys to drop back 300 meters before they're actually legally racing. So it's just ridiculous. And I think a lot of people I did hear were, you know, quite upset with the technical officials for not being stricter on the drafting. But I think you do have to cut them some slack. I can only imagine how overwhelmed they were when they got out there on the motorbikes and they saw these huge trains of athletes. Like, where do you even begin? And they're all volunteers, these guys. So unfortunately, the reality is that when you sell 2,300 tickets onto a fast, flat course that's only 22 kilometers out and back, unless you want those athletes to spread out for 27 kilometers, look, there's going to be a lot of drafting in these age group races. And unfortunately, that's just the way it is. And the people that really suffered were the ones that couldn't hang on to these packs. I mean, we were still riding at, you know, typically like 200 watts. So if you weren't quite fit enough to ride at 200 watts, you were left behind from these packs. And everyone else that's slightly fitter sets a way faster time than you can. It makes your time seem way worse comparatively, when if you were just a slight bit better, you would have been able to hang on to these packs, or if you were just a slightly better swimmer, you would have got out of the water at the same time as these packs, and then you would have like rode off with them. So, I mean, the people that suffered the most were the ones that just weren't quite fit enough to hold on the bike, and that's really what's quite disappointing about it all. But so anyway, after we finished the 85 kilometer ride, head into T2, quickly rack the bike, and I mean, granted, I'm still confused here because I actually think I've missed a turn somewhere along the bike course, and that's why I've only recorded 85k. So I was actually a little hesitant. I almost stopped and asked someone, like, am I actually okay to go off and run? But I just thought, whatever, I've come this far, I'm not gonna go back out on the bike. So shoes on, and I was out on the run, and I felt pretty good from the start, and I am happy with the run. So the swim and the run, both great. Like, there's, you know, take nothing away from those. I actually still ended up holding pretty close to the target power I wanted to hold on that bike course. It's just that I was going a lot faster than I realistically should have been going, holding that kind of power. So it's kind of ridiculous, but it still gave me the chance to actually run off a hard bike. And that's what my goal was to run off pushing, you know, for 2.5 hours, what my 70.3 power was. And I pretty much got to do that. It just turned out to be a lot faster when I was riding at 70.3 power. So out on the run, and I'm feeling pretty good for the first sort of 3 or 4K. Started it out a little slow just to try and shake my legs out, but I ended up finding a pretty good rhythm and a pretty good run partner in Tyson. So I found a fella that was running pretty much exactly identical splits to me, and we just did we basically did the next 17 kilometers together. We crossed the finish line together. So it's a huge help if you are in a race. If you can find someone that's running really similar to you, you'll actually both help each other along. Both races I've done now, I've had exactly that, and it's been a huge advantage on the run leg. So was really lucky again to be able to find another good run partner. And I was cruising along at, about 4:15 per kilometer. Some were a little faster, some obviously slower because there is a pretty solid hill that takes, I would guess, about 2 to 3 minutes to get up. And they obviously slow you down. So I was hitting some Ks, 4:10 pace, and I felt like that was where I was really reaching my threshold, where if I got any faster, I was getting quite out of breath. So I was happy to run it in at a really, comfortable is not quite the right word, but a really controlled pace to take it to a 1:28:30 half marathon. And when I cross the finish line, I obviously look up and I see 4:19, and that is like pretty much 30 minutes faster than my goal time. But I was able to race it at pretty much exactly my goal effort for the day. So it was still good. I mean, honestly, to set a time that fast, it's a little underwhelming when I do know that, it's not quite a fair time. Like, there was a ton of drafting on that bike. Like, realistically, I should have just sat there at the end of the bike, in T2 and just given myself a 10-minute penalty, because it was quite ridiculous what was going on out there. But they were the dynamics on the day, and it was either that or sit up every time I was passed, and then I'm essentially not riding for half the day because I'm just waiting for these huge trains of athletes to go past me. And so it's a little underwhelming like that. But look, the main thing about Ironman racing and 70.3 racing is that I had a ton of family and a ton of friends there to cheer me along. And that's really what it's all about. You get to, achieve a goal in front of your friends and family who are all there to support you. And that's what's most important. So yeah, the time's a little arbitrary, but look, the experience is still amazing. And it actually is a great fun race to do. Super scenic, great environment, great supporters. It's just that, on the bike, it's a little unfair. It's unfair for everyone, really. You're either getting a massive unfair advantage, or you can't quite hang on to these packs. and then all of a sudden everyone else is getting a huge advantage over you. So I would say take the times from the day with a huge grain of salt, but look, if I'm thinking positively from it, it gives me a really good PB to try and break again in the future on a more honest course. Now, race nutrition was pretty good for the whole day. As I said, with the pre-race nutrition, 500ml Gatorade, banana, and some yogurt and nuts. But then on the bike, I hit pretty much exactly as I wanted to, with about 2.5 liters of Gatorade on there. And I think I had 2 or 3 salt sticks, but I did forget to take those until like the last 45 minutes. So probably didn't consume as much sodium as I wanted, but I didn't take any gels on the bike. And then on the run, I was super flexible. I just grabbed Gatorade whenever I felt like taking it. So honestly, I can't give a very good description of how much I would have consumed on the run, because it was pretty sporadic. It was, you know, I might drink 3 aid stations in a row and then take 1 or 2 off. And then I was drinking quite a bit of water, definitely more so than I did in like my first Ironman. For this 70.3, I was probably drank water from an aid station 4 or 5 times over the Gatorade. So I was quite thirsty, and maybe that's just the heat on the day was causing a fair bit of extra thirst. I mean, it was probably in the mid 20 degrees Celsius from memory. But overall, didn't really cramp, didn't have any kind of, you know, bonking or energy issues throughout the race. I did feel like the thing that was holding me back the most was like aerobic fitness. I couldn't really run any faster because I would have been out of breath. And then what was holding me back on the bike was the fact that to get in front of these packs, I would have to push like 300 watts, way above my threshold. So I was never gonna get in front of the bike. And then the swim, I think, you know, technique is the biggest thing I can work on in the swim, and that efficiency. So plenty of things to work on there. In the water, I think really raising that aerobic capacity on the run's gonna help me out quite a lot too. And then, I mean, the frustrating thing is I don't have a great sense of where my bike's at from that bike course. But that being said, moving back into Ironman training now, the bike is going to be a priority because it plays such a huge role in the race. And I should give a shout out to, for this weekend, Mafia were absolutely amazing, and they actually loaned me a set of really good quality race wheels for the race. And honestly, they actually were really good wheels. You know, I sort of have raced with carbon wheels before, but nothing to this kind of quality. So I'll definitely link to those guys down below so you can check out their Instagram and website and whatnot. They do loan out wheels to Australian races where they are actually going to attend the race. Otherwise you can buy the wheels, but yeah, honestly, I genuinely noticed a huge difference riding on a good quality set of race wheels. I definitely hope to be able to use those wheels on, you know, like a course like Port Macquarie where I really can put them to good use. Because I noticed just on the day before when I was going for, you know, just a, you know, warm-up ride and check out the course a little bit, when I had those wheels on to test them out, they were a lot smoother and a lot faster than anything I'd ridden on before. So top quality wheels, highly recommend, and thanks heaps to Carbon Mafia for loaning me those for the weekend. I'll link down below just to all the specific details for the actual wheels that I was on, if anyone does want to use them. So I mean, moving forwards now, and you know, things we've learned from this race, the one thing I'm really motivated for now is to actually improve my swim quite a lot. Reason being, I want to get out of the swim in future races at the front of the pack. So I want to be out there and heading out on the bike with no one in front of me, so I don't have to stress so much about these kind of dynamics where there's tons of riders in front, tons of riders behind, tons of riders around me, and I'm just crammed in there trying to weave my way around things. So I want to get out of the water in front so I don't have to worry about all these kind of dynamics as much, I should say. I mean, it's not that I would have to worry about them at all, but definitely not as much. So I feel like I have been making pretty good progress in the swim. I mean, you don't have to go too far back to the point that I was swimming 2 minutes per 100, and now in a race I'm doing, you know, 135s, 140s per 100. So the swim's going well. But the fact that we're going back into, you know, Ironman specific training means that the bike will be a huge priority because it plays such a huge role in Ironman racing. So there's going to be a lot more volume on the bike. I really have been finding that I really enjoy this upper aerobic specific style of training on the bike. So a lot of those, you know, 70.3 over under kind of sessions where we're pushing that, you know, upper aerobic almost to threshold kind of level. I feel like I'm responding quite well to that. And then the run, I've been really enjoying the Tuesday track sessions that I've been going to, so working on some of that top end stuff in the run. But as well as that, I think I do respond quite well to volume, and we're going to ramp up those long runs again, which are very crucial for Ironman training. As far as what I'm training for now, I am planning on doing an indoor Ironman around December 4th, I think is the date at the moment. So that'll be a pool swim, a trainer ride, and a treadmill run. And I might try and do some kind of charity work along with that, seeing as it wouldn't be the most pleasant way to do an Ironman. But it will give me some good stats as far as what I can hold in the pool, a really clear indication of the power I can hold on the bike, and then a run without any kind of hills or wind or anything like that. So I do think that that means we are now 12 weeks out from my next, let's call it race, if you want to call an indoor Ironman a race. At this stage I am planning on doing it solo, but it's an open invite. Anyone in the world that wants to do it with me, you're more than welcome if you are so inclined to do an Ironman indoors. But yeah, all in all, a really fun weekend away with friends and family. That's what matters most about Ironman training. So I was able to, achieve a goal, set a fast PB that's going to be really great fun to try and break on an actual honest course one day. And yeah, I'm just excited to get back into some good heavy training. That's what it's all about.
Is that him? Oh no. Well, that was him. My bad.